Picture this. It's a humid Friday night in Texas, somewhere around 2004. You're sitting at a red light in a brand new Dodge Viper. You've spent $80,000 on a V10 engine, a carbon fiber hood, and the right to look down on everyone else on the road. You are the apex predator. Then, something pulls up next to you. It's a blue Chevrolet Silverado, and not a nice one. The paint is peeling off the hood like a bad sunburn. There's a ladder rack in the back, and the wheel wells are covered in rust. It sounds like a tractor, idling with a rough, uneven chop that shakes the mirrors. You laugh. You actually laugh out loud. You look over at the driver, some kid in a baseball cap who looks like he just finished a shift at a construction site. You rev your engine, letting that V10 scream just to remind him of his place in the food chain. The light turns green. You dump the clutch. Your tires scream for traction. You nail a perfect shift into second gear. You look in your rearview mirror, expecting to see the truck fading into the distance. But he's not in your mirror. He's in front of you, 3 car lengths ahead, and pulling away. That beat-up Farmtruck just launched like it was shot out of a cannon. You can hear the violent hiss of turbochargers over the sound of your own engine. By the time you hit third gear, the race is over. You didn't just lose. You were humiliated by a vehicle that was designed to haul manure built by a teenager in a driveway for less than the cost of your tires. This isn't a scene from a movie. This was the moment the automotive world changed forever. This is the story of how a junkyard engine, some cheap plumbing pipes, and a $5 hand tool destroyed the hierarchy of speed. To understand why this happened, we have to go back to the late 90s. For decades, speed was reserved for the wealthy. If you wanted a 10-second car, you needed a custom-built race engine, forged internals, and a team of engineers. Or you needed to buy a Ferrari. Speed was expensive. It was exclusive. But in 1999, General Motors accidentally created a monster. They didn't mean to. They were just trying to build a reliable engine for their boring, everyday work trucks. They called it the Vortec 5300, or as history would come to know it, the LS. On paper, it was nothing special. An old-school pushrod V8. Simple, heavy, ancient technology compared to the overhead cams coming out of Europe and Japan. These engines were put into millions of Tahoes, Suburbans, and Silverados. They were designed to tow boats and survive 200,000 miles of neglect. But here is where the Detroit engineers made a mistake. They overbuilt it, massively. They gave this cheap, mass-produced engine a cast-iron block that was virtually indestructible. They designed a bottom end with 6-bolt main bearing caps that clamped the crankshaft like a vice grip. It was structurally overkill. It was like building a garden shed with the steel beams of a skyscraper. Fast forward a few years. These trucks started crashing. They started getting old, and millions of these engines ended up in junkyards. Supply and demand kicked in. Because there were so many of them, they were worthless. You could walk into a scrapyard, pull an engine out of a wrecked van, and take it home for $300. For a while, nobody cared. A stock 5.3-liter engine only made about 285 horsepower. That's enough to merge onto the highway, but it's not enough to scare a Corvette. But then, a few backyard mechanics started asking a dangerous question. What happens if we force air into it? In the professional racing world, adding a twin-turbo setup is a delicate art. It costs $10,000. You need precise tuning, expensive fuel systems, and custom fabrication. If you take a normal engine and shove 20 pounds of boost into it, physics usually steps in to destroy you. Here is the problem. When you force-feed an engine with a turbo, the temperature inside the cylinder skyrockets. Metal expands when it gets hot. The piston rings, those little metal circles that seal the cylinder, start to grow. If they grow too much, the ends of the rings touch. This is called butting the rings. When that happens, the ring has nowhere to go. It binds up, snaps the top of the piston off, and your engine turns into a grenade. This was the barrier. This is why you couldn't just turbocharge a junkyard engine. It would blow up. But then, the redneck engineers found a solution. And it didn't cost thousands of dollars. It didn't require a machine shop. It required a $5 hand file. They called it gapping the rings. These guys would drag a greasy 200,000-mile engine into their garage. They would tear it apart, pull out the pistons, and literally take a metal file and grind down the ends of the piston rings. It was crude.
It was imprecise. It was something a Ferrari engineer would have a heart attack looking at. But it worked. By manually creating a massive gap in the rings, they gave the metal room to expand under extreme heat. Suddenly, the game changed. Mechanics started buying cheap knockoff turbos from China, turbos that cost $150 on eBay. They went to Home Depot and bought plumbing pipes to build exhaust manifolds. They welded it all together in their driveways. It looked ugly. The welds looked like bubblegum. The wiring was a fire hazard. But then they put it on the dyno.
A $300 junkyard engine, a $150 turbo, a homemade fuel system, and suddenly the screen read 600 horsepower, then 800, then 1,000. These engines were taking abuse that would shatter a Porsche engine, and they were asking for more. And if you did manage to blow one up, who cares? You just went back to the junkyard and bought another one for $300. This brings us back to our Blue Silverado, the legend known as the Blue Truck or Parish 8 on the early internet forums. From the outside, it was invisible. It was a sleeper in the truest sense of the word. It still had the factory suspension, it still had the bench seat, but underneath, it had 1,000 horsepower and four-wheel drive. And that four-wheel drive was the secret weapon. You see, a Supra or a Viper has a lot of power, but it only has two tires trying to put that power to the ground. If they floor it on the street, they just spin their tires and make smoke. The Farmtruck, it sends power to all four corners. When the light turns green, it doesn't spin, it hooks. It leaves the line with the violence of a dragster. Videos started hitting the internet. Grainy, low-resolution clips of this blue truck absolutely destroying legends. There's a famous clip of a highly tuned Supra doing a highway pull, sounding like a jet fighter, and right next to it, effortless, is the blue truck. The passenger in the truck is filming, laughing hysterically, while the Supra driver looks over in absolute disbelief. It shattered the ego of the automotive elite. It proved that you didn't need a trust fund to go fast. You didn't need Italian heritage. You just needed a socket set, a junkyard, and a total disregard for the factory warranty. The movement exploded. Suddenly, everyone was doing it. We saw the rise of the Farmtruck on cable TV, a Chevy C10 with a camper shell that raced Lamborghinis. We saw teenagers putting these engines into everything: Volvo wagons, Mazda Miatas, old Ford Mustangs. It became known as the LS swap, and it annoyed the purists. Ford guys hated it, import guys hated it. They called it cheating. They said it lacked soul. But you can't argue with physics, and you certainly can't argue with taillights fading into the distance. This phenomenon did something important. It democratized horsepower. It took speed out of the hands of the rich and gave it back to the working class. It reminded the car industry that complexity isn't always better. Sometimes a simple iron block and a hand file are all you need to conquer the world. Today, if you go to a drag strip, half of the cars there are powered by these junkyard engines. The secret is out. Prices have gone up a little bit. You might have to pay $500 now instead of $300, but the spirit is the same. So the next time you pull up next to a rusty old pickup truck at a red light, listen closely. If you hear the faint whistle of a turbo, or if the idle sounds a little too aggressive, don't laugh, don't rev your engine, just let him go.